Welcome into another episode of the Armchair Titans podcast. Austin Nelson here with my guys, Brett Batchelor, Noah McKay, Trey Watkins. What is going on, guys? How we doing?
I'm good. How we doing, boys?
Oh, it's a treat to finally sit down. So I closed on my first house on Friday. So I've been in and doing that whole process. So I finally had a time to sit down. I'm actually at a friend's house, so this is not me. I didn't kill that. But we have the pleasure of being with somebody who, if you're a Titans fan, you have to know who this man is, because he's done so much for us as fans and given us a lot of great knowledge and a lot of great information. So we are joined by Mr. Rhett Bryan. Rhett, how are you, sir?
I'm great, gentlemen. How are you this evening?
Fantastic.
Pretty good.
All right.
Rhett, you are the executive producer and the game day host for Titans Radio, which I know we listen to on a constant basis after the game, before the game. I even do it during the game sometimes to kind of hear what Mike's saying, and Coach McGinnis. So talk a little bit about when you started there, how long you've been doing it, and just kind of all that.
Sure. We started the then Tennessee Oilers radio network in the summer of 1997 when the Oilers moved to Tennessee. And the guy that had this position prior to me, Larry Stone, he came over from the North Carolina Tar Heels radio network. He had a lot of work with Coach Dean Smith and also in their football program too. And he was brought over by then Citadel Broadcasting to start the Tennessee Oilers radio network. And I was I was a jock. I was a disc jockey playing classic rock records, because 104.5 back then was a classic rock station. And I was kind of the resident sports nut in our building. And so I was introduced to Larry, and Larry said, "How would you like to cover an NFL team?" And I was like, "Okay, does the Pope wear a funny hat?" Because yes, the answer is yes, absolutely. Didn't know a thing about it. Didn't know how to cover it. Didn't know what to do. Because obviously where we live, we didn't have a franchise prior to that. And quite frankly, the Falcons and the Bengals and whoever else was close was so bad for so long. And I'm old enough that, television packages were different when I was a kid. So you got the game of the week, basically. So you're either a Washington Redskins fan or a Cowboys fan or a Packer, it's whatever you got on television. So, like Mike Keith and I we grew up Dallas Cowboys fans. But we had no idea, no clue how to cover an NFL team. But the answer was an overwhelming yes. And I remember that day he handed me a cassette recorder. This will date it for you. And I went over to the Lowe's Vanderbilt Plaza Hotel, and there was a press conference with Mr. Adams and with Bruce Matthews and Frank Wycheck to kind of introduce some of the faces of the franchise. And the next thing you know, I'm at training camp at TSU at Hale Stadium covering the Tennessee Oilers. And I spotted for Mike Keith when he became the voice of the Titans in '99, and did a lot of behind the scenes work, did a lot of things like a network game day type producer in certain, like if I was spotting during the game, then I would help with features before and pre-game, and then I would go to the locker room and interview players post game. But yeah, started traveling with the team in '99, and and then in 2014, Larry left that position. I was very fortunate enough to get this position, and so that's when I transitioned to that role. And then we brought in Jonathan Hutton on the sidelines in 2014 from 104.5 The Zone, and kind of the rest is history.
That's awesome. You told us before the show too that this would be a milestone number when we reach the home opener this year. So kind of hit on that too. What was that number, so we can tell everybody else too about the milestone number?
Yeah, the Houston Texans game, the home opener, regular season home opener at Nissan Stadium, will be the 400th game in Titans history. Now that's counting preseason, postseason, and regular season stuff. But Mike Keith and I have done every one of those 400 games, if I'm lucky to make it for the next 6 or 7 leading up to it. But yeah, it's really cool to say that I've been a part of that. I've seen a lot of faces come and go, coaches, players, administrators, whatever, and it's been an interesting transition to see how it started with the Tennessee Oilers when no one really cared that a team was here because it was a cast off from someone else. They went and played in Memphis in '97, and that was like a home game for the Steelers and the other folks that were coming into the Liberty Bowl. Mr. Adams quickly decided that that was not probably a good thing to do because the stadium was being built over by the river, and he transitioned and got a deal at Dudley Field with Vanderbilt in '98, and that went a little better. And then, of course, '99 logo, team change, new uniforms, the whole bit, which is kind of weird. Now, I'm not calling it, but this year, new uniforms, a little bit of a change there. The Super Bowl is in Atlanta. That's correct. And I was there at Super Bowl 34 in 1999 or January 30th, 2000, and I would very much like to go back to another one. It's been a long time, and I was a much younger fellow when I did that before.
God, no kidding. I was talking to somebody about that today, how long it's been since the Titans have won the division, and they said 10 years. Yep. It's been 10 years. So
yeah. When they went 13-3 in 2008 with Kerry Collins, that's right.
Kerry Collins, Javon Curse, everybody.
Yeah.
So you kind of just hit on something, right, that I wanted to talk about with you. You have seen, since '97, you've seen the Jeff Fisher, you've seen the Mike Munchak, you've seen the
Wisdom Hunt,
and then you've seen the Mike Malarkey. All those coaching staffs, mostly a lot of Jeff Fisher, obviously, but you now see Mike Vrabel. So kind of just talk about his demeanor, him as a coach, and just him as a person. What are your takeaways about Mike Vrabel?
Well, it's obvious that he came from the New England Patriots system. He's very deliberate in what he does. He has a purpose behind everything that he chooses to do. He'll be quick to give you the answer on why he's doing it that way. And if it's something he's not comfortable with, he's not going to divulge it. A la what he said Friday night at Centennial High School about the injury thing. He said, I'm not going to say anything until September when, it's mandated by the league. You have to give some type of injury report. And that's a byproduct of, the New England way. Now, yeah, he's been on a fast track in the last 4 years to get to being a head coach in the National Football League. You're talking about a guy that played 13 years at linebacker and did really well on the biggest stage in the world, being an extra tight end catching touchdowns from Brady in the Super Bowl. That's it's incredible. But he, I think, is a lot like John Robinson when they were coming up through the ranks. They had a lot of time to sit and think about what they wanted to do. And I've said this before about John Robinson. I can almost visualize him driving up and down country roads and looking at whatever prospect in whatever podunk town, and nearly wanting to quit 3 or 4 times because he was away from his family, and thinking about what, when I get to this point, this is what I'm going to do. Well, I think Mike Vrabel was a student of the game. Dean Pease, the night he was introduced in front of season ticket members at Opryland back in February or March, said he's the smartest player he's ever coached. Now this guy coached Ray Lewis. This guy's coached a bunch of great players, and he makes an immediate impression that he's an ex-player. He comes from the Patriots system, and I'm interested to see what he does going forward. Now, my impression is in practice, it's incredible what he's done with the time in all of this, because very little hands-on hips waiting around kind of stuff. He is really efficient with the timing in this thing. He has guys working on drills and things, and kind of cross training, cross coaching guys all the time. Whether it's, for example, like Kerry Combs was with the D lineman working on deflections and swatting the ball at the line. And who better to teach that from the guy that's going to be teaching Kevin Byard and all those guys, probably the favorite new coach in all of this, the fiery guy. And been very impressed with how he's kind of plotted everything out. Now, he's going to be a rookie head coach in the National Football League, and he has not done this at this level. He's played it, but he's not put on that headset and done it in game situations. And that's why I say he will make a rookie mistake here and there. I'm sure he will, because he hasn't done it yet. But I think those mistakes may be few and far between. And listen, if he's on a trajectory and a path like a John Robinson, only on the field as a coach, I'd say the Titans are in pretty good shape.
All right. Now, branching off from Mike Vrabel, I want to get your thoughts on LaFleur and Mariota and their relationship. This is, I believe, Marcus Mariota's third or fourth offensive coordinator ever since he came into the league. And a lot of people outside of, a lot of people outside maybe an organization would say, well, I mean, it's not that hard. Maybe just adjusting a new offense that coordinator's bringing in. And the short answer to that is not that easy. So I want to get your thoughts on Marcus and LaFleur's relationship and how the new offense is growing on Mario.
Well, I'll say this, Trey. The first impression I had from Matt LaFleur when he was introduced to the media back in February when they were all hired, we asked about, is he one of those coaches where it's like, you're going to, adapt to my system or else my way or the highway? And he's like, quite the contrary. He said, I don't think that a guy can be successful unless you build something and play to his attributes. And, I watched all 8 practices with Coach Dave McGinnis, and he says that this offense is tailor-made for Marcus Mariota. It is going to be a perfect fit. Now, is it going to be an overnight thing? No. And just look, in these first handful of practices, you've seen mostly the defense win these practices, which is expected, but especially when you're installing a new offense. But Friday night, at that Friday Night Lights practice at Centennial High School, I felt like the offense took a little step forward because they went one-on-ones straight down the field, no errors, no fouls, timing good. And Marcus went, I think, 6 for 6 on that drive, finished with a 3-yard bootleg to the left for a touchdown. And it was the best offensive drive I'd seen all camp. And it's just because it's like anything, it's timing and placement and spacing. But as far as your question, Trey, from what I can gather, everything is good with Marcus and with Matt LaFleur. Just seeing him working with all 3 of the quarterbacks, working from their base and working on their footwork, and so that timing is calibrated. Coach McGinnis and I were watching them work with all 3 of those guys, and it's him and it's Pat O'Hara, the quarterback coach, and they're all working with those specific timing. And there's, it's variances on that. But you can tell now, or I can tell now, when the ball's supposed to be released, and when the route is right and the timing's right, it's going to be moving the ball ahead of those chains, and you're going to have a drive a lot like you saw Friday night if you were at Centennial High School.
I think I speak for all of us and Titans fans everywhere when I say thank God to hear that this offense is tailored for Mariota, because in the past it seemed like it's Mariota trying to fit into an offense and not the offense fitting around Mariota. And when you have a playmaker of that caliber at quarterback, I mean, there's offenses that you can put around him to make him successful, and it hasn't always seemed that way with this Titans team. But I think we're all looking forward to seeing glimpses of it, starting in the preseason, and then, as they develop throughout the season. By the end of the season, you need to see an offense that's built for number 8.
Well, Noah, let's say this. The long-standing joke is that the Titans don't run screens, and they don't run well. Yes. Well, that, sir, is about to change drastically.
Thank God.
I think you guys are going to be pleasantly surprised at who is involved in these things, because it's not just a Corey Davis. It's not just a Taywan Taylor. And again, spacing, timing, those kinds of things are key in this. But for people who have been begging for years to open this up and do – now, I'm not talking about throwing 50-yard bombs. I'm sure they'll have some of that in there. But this is going to be a dink and dunk, death by 1,000 paper cuts, move it down the field kind of offense and get it into position to score. And look, Deion Lewis is going to be a rock star in this. He stays healthy. And listen, 22 is right there with him. I mean, Derrick Henry, those guys, look, it's no secret that the targets to the backs under Mike Mularkey in the last 2 years weren't that many. I think it was 64 targets in 2016 and 84 targets 2 years ago, and then I think 64 last year. In Matt LaFleur, any offense he's been involved in the last 3 seasons, triple-digit targets for those backs. So get ready to see a lot of that also. And this defense is going to be good too. I mean, good gracious. I hate what happened to Jonathan Cyprian. Sip's a great person. They bring in Kenny Vaccaro. Kenny Vaccaro is a guy that I think can help this thing. I am concerned about him in some coverage packages based on what I get intel-wise from our friends in New Orleans. But he's a thumper. He likes to stop the run. But I think the greater sum of this, the whole parts of this up front in that front seven is going to help all of that, because if they got the pass rush right, he may not have to worry about as much in that. And if the secondary locks things down, it'll be reciprocal to the pass rush, obviously. But I see a lot of things that I like. It's going to take a little time with the offense. The defense is going to be fine, though.
Yeah, I agree. And then real quick, I just want to throw this out there. You're talking about Vaccaro, and Rhett, you probably don't know this, but I've been probably the biggest critic of Jonathan Cyprien on the field possible. That's awful what happened to him. I mean, nobody was happy to see that at all. But I think that they, in my opinion, made probably about the best pickup they could have to replace him, because Cyprien's strength wasn't in the pass coverage either. I mean, that's Kevin Byard's territory back there. We all know it. He's known as the run thumper, getting up into the running lanes. So what are your opinions of this Vaccaro signing? What have you seen? What have you heard about it in the very limited time that he's been here?
Well, I messaged our longtime Titans radio draft analyst, Mike Detillier, who's the author of the MND Draft Report. He's the only analyst that we've had for over 20 years. And I said he could give us a good thumbnail description. And he says KV is tough, very physical, versatile in usage in different schemes, aggressive in run support, good blitzer off the edge, and solid in coverage underneath. But Vaccaro gets grabby and gets penalized on the deeper throws downfield, which, that's something we don't need. But here's the other thing. Kenny Vaccaro has a lot to prove in this deal, because this guy was a 15th overall pick 5 years ago. He spent time in New Orleans. He's had a little injury history here and there, missed a few games. This dude's got something to prove. And look, first time we laid eyes on him was yesterday at Nissan Stadium at the scrimmage. And what did he do when the thing is done? While guys are signing autographs, he goes over and signs a few autographs. He goes out with a newer safety, Thompson, there, and they start tossing the ball around 30 minutes after the thing's over. He's hungry.
I'm surprised he practiced, to be honest with you. I couldn't believe it. I saw, I think Jim Wyatt posted a picture of Vaccaro, and I was like, he's already? Like, he just got here. Yeah. And I think there's a lot about him. And to your point, what you just said, Brett, the answers he gave the media after practice just seemed like the typical John Robinson guy. So it's easy to see why John liked him. So again, hey guys, we're with Rhett Bryan. Follow him at Twitter, on Twitter at the Tennessee. Brett, go ahead.
So you were talking about how you've been doing this since 1997. You and Mike Keith, this will be y'all's 400th game. And obviously there are other people that work for the organization that have been doing this for a long time that we might not know about, or that are just behind the scenes and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So you talked about the Super Bowl going back to Atlanta this year, and you guys have been with the organization the whole time. And this coaching staff and this team, just what would it mean for guys like you and people that have been with the organization since the beginning to bring a Super Bowl to Nashville? Just what would the emotions be for guys like you guys?
Brett, I don't even know if I can answer that, because it would be, it's, the penultimate North American sport, and that Lombardi Trophy is the symbol of all of it. 32 teams want that every year. And if you're lucky enough to get one of those, I was 26, 27 years old when they went the first time. And here I am 20 years later and waiting for them to knock down a door and try to get in there again. And there's a lot of people in the Titans front office that have been employees that moved from Houston that are still in the organization. And I would be most happy for them. Listen, when they lost by a yard in Atlanta, I was physically ill over that deal for about 4 days, because I think I'd just rather them lost by about 40 than to lose that way, because it was just gut wrenching. You go into the locker room and you see grown men in tears, whether it's Steve McNair, Eddie George, Brad Hopkins, and let's not forget Blaine Bishop had hit Ernie Conwell so hard he knocked himself out of the ball game. So I thought he was possibly dead. I went to talk to the then physician, Dr. Burton Elrod, to make sure he was okay, because I knew he'd rung his bell at the very least, sprained his neck. But to see all of that and, thought, well, this team is good. They'll just go right back again. And then in 2000, I think they had a better squad then. That was the team that should have gone to the Super Bowl.
Right.
You were loaded, and then they had the number 1 seed, and then the Baltimore Ravens came in here and just cut the pins out from under them in one of the worst games in that building. I mean, as Aldo Greco's last game, he had he missed a field goal, he had one blocked. Ray Lewis strips Eddie George and runs one back. It was just a nightmare. So, as far as getting back and doing all that, I can't even imagine what that would be like, because I think I took so many things for granted because they went so early in the game.
Right.
Their time and tenure here. I can't even put it into words.
You look at back in the day, like when you're talking about when they first made it, when it was the Adelphia Coliseum was one of the loudest stadiums in the NFL, and it was always packed out. And you look at now how Bridgestone Arena is kind of like Adelphia used to be. If the Titans were, you said, to make it back to the Super Bowl, would you expect the same reaction from fans, like how they reacted when the Predators made it to the Stanley Cup, about Titans fans?
I don't think there's any doubt, Brett, because this is the NFL, and the Titans had such a long drought of playoff appearances. They just snapped that this year. 9 years since they've been in a playoff game, 14 years since they won a playoff game. And so that allowed a franchise like the Predators to catch some traction there, and they've done really well. But you're right. I mean, that building, when it first opened, and it didn't really catch fire till they were about 6-7 wins into the thing. Like the Halloween day in '99 against the Rams, when Steve McNair came back from his back surgery and Fred Miller jumped off sides for them about 18 times that day or whatever it was. That place got rocking. And then as the thing got closer to, realizing how special this thing could be, it was unbelievable. And that carried on into the 2000 season after they'd gone to the Super Bowl and lost. I've been to Seattle. I've been to these other places, and I've never heard anything like those windows of time. I mean, we have these headphone boxes. We always have the windows open in booth 5. And when I would sit down there and spot with Mike, and we'd have these headphone boxes, you couldn't turn the volume up loud enough to hear each other speak because it was so loud outside. And, look, the Music City Miracle, I was sitting right in between he and Pat Ryan when that whole organic thing went down. I don't think they could have rehearsed it any better than when that happened. I heard it in stereo. I couldn't hear much in my headphones, but I heard them yelling back and forth almost like a tennis match. And I couldn't believe, in front of my eyes, here this play is developing. Was it a forward pass? Nope, didn't look like it. There's no flag. There's no – and, to see all the highs go into the low when, Phil Luckett goes into the booth and, checks out the play and to make sure that it was actually everything was straight. It was a lateral. And then for him to come out and say there's no evidence and whatever, and it's call stands touchdown, and the place just erupted. You see strangers hugging each other in the stands, and and it was a cold day that day. And it's so crazy leading up to that because Ralph Wilson, the late owner of the Bills, had made it a point that he wanted to start Rob Johnson in that game because they'd given him all this big money contract. He played one really good game playing for the injured Mark Brunell in Jacksonville. And that ended up getting him like a $25 million deal back then. And he wasn't that good. And, Doug Flutie had played all of that time. I still say if Doug Flutie had played in that ball game, it probably wouldn't be a Music City Miracle because Doug Flutie was, he was lights out. Right. Rob Johnson, that was another story because Javon had, a sack and a half, 2 sacks against him, and It was just a dogfight. But to see all that develop there in the last few seconds, I'll never forget it. And I'd like to see some more things like it. Maybe not as dramatic, but I'd like to see some W's. But the franchise could certainly get back to those kinds of things with a ravenous, home crowd that just erupts.
Right.
All right, so we like to do a question of the week at the end of every podcast and just kind of listen to what we have to say, and we kind of do something funny. But since it's you, we kind of just want to hear what you have to say because you know so much about the Titans, have been through everything with them. And our question this week is your favorite Titans moment, your favorite memory. And I know that could go on forever with you, but if you had to choose in particular, what would you say? What would you pick?
Well, it would come down to a couple of things. I will give you a regular season answer and I'll give you a postseason answer. The regular season answer was December the 1st, 2002 in the Meadowlands against the New York Giants. Steve McNair is busted from head to toe. This is the window of time where he didn't practice every week. And you're like, but this is the week he's not going to play. And by the way, we have these electrical connections called a dry pair that we hook up. And this was when we used to have either the head coach or the coordinators on. And a lot of times in visiting locker rooms, those dry pairs was in a training room. Well, in this particular training room was where Steve McNair was taking a nap on a training table. He'd gone out real early to throw football around, and then he'd gone in and I think John Takahashi, one of the longtime trainers who still works with the team, said, "Hey, Max, taking a nap." I said, "Gotcha. I'm just going to test real quietly over here in the corner, and I'll get out of his way." To see all that, they're trailed by 8 points, 9 points, whatever it was, right there with 2 minutes to go. He leads them on a drive, and he busted up everything. He has the keeper for a 2-point conversion to tie it up. They win the toss, they get it down, they kick an Edney field goal, and they get out of there with a win in a New York market that really didn't know much about the Tennessee Titans, in a major television market. And I have people that lived in New York and New Jersey tell me that they were talking about this Steve McNair guy a couple of days later after all that happened, because they came in there and beat their big blue guys up. But that was the precursor to Steve McNair getting on the national radar, because the next year he was a co-MVP with Peyton Manning. That's my regular season moment. My playoff moment would have to be after the AFC Championship game in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
Now, let me say this. Jacksonville, you knew had lost 2 times in the regular season. Once in September in a monsoon. Samari Rolle picks off Mark Brunell almost point-blank range. And Jeff Fisher, being the sly fox that he is, they run the clock out with Craig Hentrick. He runs out of the back of the end zone for a safety. They leave by 1 point, leave the town with a 1-point victory. And then they just hammer them in December in Nashville. And so here they go. It's AFC Championship game. And I remember getting up in the team hotel that morning and thinking, you know what? They may just pull this off a 3rd time. I tossed and turned about it all night, because what are the odds? It doesn't happen a whole lot. And the whole town, all of Jacksonville, was running their mouths from the lady that was doing the weather forecast on the local NBC affiliate, which is right next door to Everbank Field. She said, "Oh, it's going to be a beautiful day today, sunshine and 60 or whatever. The Jacksonville Jaguars will beat the Titans today and go to Super Bowl 34, blah, 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 blah." Like, it was just, and get to the stadium. The elevator operator, older gentleman, running his mouth. I mean, just talking smack, everybody. So I tell Floyd Reese, the then general manager, I was like, these people are very confident, almost too confident. I said, even our guy in the elevator is talking smack here. He said, "Really?" He said, "That's interesting. We'll see how this goes." Well, McNair has a big run there, and Derek Mason has a return, and they just blow things up. And in fact, I think the only bad thing that happened is Marcus Robertson broke his leg and wasn't able to play in the Super Bowl back there in the back of that secondary with Blaine Bishop. But so we're going down the elevator, and I look at Floyd Reese and I said, "That's our guy right there." And he said, he's awfully quiet this trip down, isn't he? I said, "Yes, he is." And just going to the locker room and seeing guys celebrate and knowing that, they're going to go to the Super Bowl. So, we have that equipment set up in the locker room, and I'm bringing guys over one by one. We do a longer post game, and we get on the airplane. I've flown on the charter since '99, and that's kind of an interesting perspective to see how the guys are treated and what they get to do. And it's just a commercial plane, but it's a chartered plane. And so we're flying back to Nashville, and we keep getting these updates from Nashville that they opened the stadium and that fans are coming. And it's, January, and it's 30 degrees outside. And so finally, before we make our final approach into Nashville, they say, we're going to bus into the stadium, and we're going to come out the tunnel. And I'm like, this is incredible. So My wife is there. My father-in-law's there. My brother-in-law's there, and a bunch of people I know. And we come out of like Channel 5 back then had aerial footage of us coming up the interstate to come to the stadium. And I actually walked out of the tunnel that night, and they had a small platform stage out at the 50-yard line. And that was the night that Bruce Matthews gave a speech. It was short and sweet, but he said, "On to Atlanta." He could have run for governor to that night. I think probably won in a landslide. And, Mike Keith interviewed, Coach Fisher and Mr. Adams. And as cold as it was, I didn't feel cold at all, because it was a surreal moment to know that they were going to go play in the biggest game on the North American continent stage in front of the world against the greatest show on turf. And do it in Atlanta. How convenient. And of course the weather got crazy and all that stuff with the ice storm. But that was my postseason moment, and I'll never, ever, ever forget it.
That's awesome.
That is cool. All right. So, I was thinking, and I'm just sitting here thinking while you're talking, Rhett, and there's so many to choose from. I was thinking between the Chris Johnson days, how we saw him run crazy almost every week.
That 332 yards or whatever between Smash and Dash in Kansas City, and he plays the bongos in the band. Yeah. That's a good one. That's a good one. Seeing him bust 2,000 yards in Seattle, that was a good one.
Yep.
I don't know. There's all kinds of things.
Oh,
you're right.
There was the 24-point comeback against the Giants, ironically at home back in 2006.
Vince Young.
Yep, Vince Young.
Matthias Kiwanuka just completely misses on a pass rush. Vince runs right like he always did and made him pay. And don't forget, Pac-Man Jones had a monster game.
Pac-Man was the hero.
He had a good return, and I think he picked off Eli Manning twice.
Twice.
Pac-Man was on, man.
Yes.
Golly.
And then
what a great
the 99-yard drive to Kenny Britt.
Yes, that one. Yes,
yeah, that's up there.
Let me tell you this, and of course that was against Ken Wisenhunt. Don't forget that.
Yeah.
And it was
that was the year they went to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's right. And you're talking about top draft picks against each other. That was Vince Young against Matt Leinart. And I'll tell you a funny story about that. Vince Young, and I didn't realize this till sometime later, and Kenny Britt told me about this, Damian Williams told me about this, and a couple of other receivers. That whole deal was the luck of the draw. It was all drawn up stuff in the dirt and playing backyard ball. He didn't listen to anything that Heimerdinger was saying in his headset. It's like, hey, turn left at the Pontiac or the Oldsmobile and run a hook and I'll hit you. He just did what Vince did in that 2006 Rose Bowl. And Heimerdinger was furious, as you can imagine, because he had a pretty good temper on it anyway. But it was all luck. And he led that. It was a 13, 14 play drive and hits Britt in the back of the end zone with nothing on the clock. That was unbelievable. I went and interviewed Mr. Adams in the locker room after that, and he was elated. And he admitted to me that night that he was the one that made the phone call to Nashville to make sure that my guy VY was starting again.
Right.
So yeah, you're right. There's a ton of memories like that.
Do you think that, like, maybe a couple years down the road, that people will look back at Mariota's stiff arm on Barry Church and put that play up toward, because that stiff arm is really what put us in the playoffs. So not the fact that it was against Jacksonville or anything like that, but the fact that play put us back into the playoffs. Do you think people will look at that and put it as a top play?
That and a game-sealing INT by Kevin Byard, yes. Listen, that stiff arm on Barry Church, I knew, and you got to realize, when I'm sitting where I'm sitting in the row behind Coach McGinnis and Mike Keith, and I've got a lot of stuff going on. But I realized, and I looked up and saw the play happen, and when I hear Mike's voice start to fluctuate and he starts getting excited, I knew it was something special. And then I saw it again on the replay, and I'm like, wow, this is, this is one of those things where you'll never forget it. You'll know where you were, whether you saw it at home or whether you saw it in the stadium. And, that's the kind of plays that Marcus will – and look, think about this in this offense, guys, in this Matt LaFleur offense. There'll be designed bootlegs. And there'll be things for him to run out of this thing. And he's already done it a couple times in camp. And the guy's got the wheels. There's no doubt about that. And a stiff arm? Yeah. I'd like that. I like the block on Frank Zombo to spring Derrick Henry in Kansas City on the last first down they needed too. That was pretty good stuff.
Yeah.
That was huge.
So go ahead, Troy.
If I had to really pull a memory, my favorite Titans memory, it would be, I believe it was in December of 2008 against the Steelers at home to see which team would get home field advantage.
Yes.
In the AFC playoffs. And it was the first ever Titans game I went to. My mom surprised me with tickets like 2 days before. And I was really excited. It was super cold that day too. And seeing, that fourth down gamble by Jeff Fisher with Chris Johnson running to the end zone, it's probably my favorite Titans memory.
That's when Griff had that INT to return for a touchdown as well.
Yeah. And real quick, my personal favorite is see, I thought about all the Music City Miracle and all those, and then I was like, right now it has to be Arrowhead this year because I was there and I was the fans there were so condescending and just, oh, you guys had a great season, at halftime down 18, and then the game flips Mariota to Mariota. Me and my buddy who are there just freaking out the entire time, and beer getting thrown, and just people are just so angry. And then after everyone surrounded the lower bowl, hundreds of Titans fans that were there and just going crazy for way too long. And, the staff just wanted us to leave. And it was like, there's the decade-long drought. We deserved it as Titans fans down there that day. And it was just the players came out and shook everyone's hands. And I was just like, we're going to go to New England and get boat raced. And I think everyone kind of understood that fans-wise. But that was finally like, yep, we earned this one. We earned this win in this house.
And Noah, you're exactly right. And I'll say this, 5 words about that deal. Andy Reid in the playoffs.
Yep.
Drop the mic.
Yep.
Go ahead.
You said me?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was there at the Music City Miracle, so that's obviously towards the top of the list. Although I was 3 years old, so it's one of those where you're kind of like in the younger age where you remember like a little bit of it, but not a whole lot. I was there for
this age Rhett really bad just now. He's thinking like, damn, I was this age.
Yeah. So then I was at the Pac-Man Giants game. That's at the top of my list because we've had the same seats ever since the Titans moved to Nashville. We've had the same season ticket seats all 20 years now. And my dad had told me that game, the Giants went up 21-0 in the fourth quarter. My dad told me, hey, when it hits 10 minutes, if we still haven't scored, we're gone. And we scored at like 10-15 to go in the fourth quarter. And I looked at my dad and he's like, all right, we'll wait it out. And then the game went on and on and on. And just to stay there throughout the whole thing and see the comeback win, it was unbelievable. And it's got to be at the top of my list.
Wow, that hurts, man. You were 3 at
the I was 3 years old.
My goodness.
Trey, were you even born yet? Like, Trey, were you born?
Miracle? No.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, Trey's
I'm definitely
12.
the old man in the room tonight.
Wow. Trey's 12. He just graduated elementary school. We're real proud of him here.
Oh my God.
I was even thinking, the Titans were so lucky. We were spoiled by Rob Baronis.
Yes.
A lot. To see him do the 8 field goals in Houston, one of my favorites of all time. I understand there's no offense, but I love that. But I'm with you, Trey. Mine was back in 2008 against the Steelers, just because there's so much on the line for us to finally be the big dogs in the AFC. Just for one season, it felt good. So to have the number 1 seed to clinch to the AFC throughout the playoffs, because we always said, the road to the Super Bowl goes through Nashville. So that was just to feel that for that one season.
And then Baltimore came in and ruined it again.
Still no explanation from those refs who missed that delay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fun to watch Lindale and Keith Bullock stomp on the flag. And maybe
the Tennessee Tyrants. Yes. Absolutely. And they listen, I don't care what you say, but their defense intentionally hurt CJ and knocked him out of that game.
Yes.
Because I want to say he had over 70 yards rushing, I think, when he went out after the first quarter or whatever.
They pulled his ankle.
I mean, he would have been – he was on track to run for like 200 yards or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
What a great note to end it.
Thanks. So we were joined by the one and only Rhett Bryan. Follow him again on Twitter at Rhett B Tennessee. That's the greatest handle ever. I love that.
Yeah.
Rhett, thank you so much again. So we appreciate it, and
awesome.
do have fun this season. We're excited. I know you're excited. So
yes.
We always in the show with these two words: tighten up.
Tighten up.
Tighten up.
Tighten up.
And that would be tighten up.
Tighten up.
Yeah.